You know that feeling, right? You're stuck in traffic, just fuming, convinced the entire universe has it out for you. But what if that delay, that moment of pure frustration, was actually saving you? I've got a story for you today that is going to make you rethink every single red light you've ever hit.
Seriously, think about that. What if the most infuriating, world-ending day of your life was secretly a moment of incredible grace? Well, that is exactly what happened to a woman named Bhumi Chauhan, and her story completely changes the definition of a bad day.
So picture this. Her day starts with that soul-crushing traffic we all know and hate. She finally gets to the airport, sprints to the counter for her flight AI-171, only to hear those words that make your stomach drop. Sorry, check-in is closed. Just 10 minutes. Can you imagine that feeling? The pleading, the frustration, the absolute crushing defeat. She missed her flight by 10 minutes and she was turned away from the gate. Game over. And then the news breaks. The very plane she was supposed to be on, the one she missed by that tiny margin, crashed shortly after takeoff, and there were no survivors. In one single instant, her entire world shifted. Her very first words were, "My Ganpati Bappa saved me." That awful frustration just evaporated, and it was replaced by this overwhelming feeling of gratitude. Those 10 minutes weren't a curse. They were an absolute miracle.
An experience like that, it does more than just save your life. It can literally rewire your brain. So let's dive into the psychology of what happens when you have a near miss like this. So there's this fascinating psychological concept called counterfactual thinking. It sounds complicated, but it's really just that what-if loop our brains love to get stuck in. What if I'd left 5 minutes earlier? What if that light had been green? It's just our mind's way of playing director and imagining a different ending to the movie.
But here's the thing. This what-if game is a total double-edged sword. On one side, it can trap you in this negative loop. Anxiety, what-ifs, even survivor's guilt. But on the other side, it can be this incredible reset button for your entire perspective on life.
And this is where that magic happens. It's a total lens shift. When you come that close to everything ending, the small stuff, it just doesn't matter anymore. Suddenly, your coffee getting cold isn't an annoyance. The fact that you're here to drink a cold coffee feels like an incredible privilege.
But that makes you wonder, doesn't it? Was Bhumi's story just random chance? A lucky traffic jam? Or could there be something bigger at play? This is where we step out of psychology and into philosophy. The ancient Stoics had this idea for it called Amor Fati. It literally translates to a love of one's fate. And the concept isn't just to put up with whatever happens to you. No, it's to actually love it. The good, the bad, the frustrating, all of it. And a quote that really sums this up is this: "A delay is not a denial. It's a protection of our path." It completely reframes the whole experience. We might only see the annoying delay, but this way of thinking suggests it might be a course correction, protecting a path we can't even see yet.
Okay, so this all sounds great, but how do we actually use this in our own lives, right? How do we start seeing our own frustrating setbacks, not as roadblocks, but as setups for something else? Well, it's actually pretty simple. The next time you hit one of those walls, try this 3-step process. First, just acknowledge the frustration. It's real. Feel it. Don't fight it. Then, just take a breath. And finally, ask yourself one simple question. Is this a redirection? So I'm going to ask you right now, think about that thing in your life that's frustrating you. That job you didn't get, that project that stalled. What if this is your 10-minute traffic jam? What could it possibly be saving you from or guiding you towards? Because if there's one thing we can learn from Bhumi Chauhan's incredible story, it's this. Grace doesn't always show up in a pretty gift-wrapped box. Sometimes, the greatest gift you'll ever receive looks and feels a whole lot like a traffic jam. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. The next time things don't go your way, instead of getting angry and asking, "Why is this happening to me?" maybe try a different question. Try asking, "What is my life trying to save me from?"
I want you to just picture it for a second. That very specific, awful feeling of being late. You're on the road, maybe you're running exactly 10 minutes behind schedule, and it feels like the entire world just conspires to slow you down.
Every single light turns red.
Every light is red. The car in front of you is going 15 under the speed limit, and you can literally feel your blood pressure going up. You're gripping the steering wheel, just fuming.
Now we obsess over efficiency, so those little delays, a slow computer, a missed train, they feel like personal attacks. We get so fixated on the 5 or 10 minutes we feel like we've been cheated out of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But today, we're doing a deep dive into a story that takes that exact frustration and just blows it up to a life or death scale.
Yeah.
It's the story of Bhumi Chauhan, and it completely reframes what a bad day even means. We're looking at the paradox of what we're calling the 10-minute miracle.
And that's really the mission here.
Yeah.
We're going to use her incredible experience, that feeling of, total defeat from being too late, and see how it flipped into the ultimate survival story.
Right.
We're using it to unpack really two huge ideas. First, the psychology of that what-if loop that kind of haunts us after a near miss. And second, the much bigger philosophy of learning to accept and maybe even love life's total chaos.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Let's unpack what happened. Bhumi was traveling, just a normal day, getting ready to take Indian Airways flight AI-171.
A totally routine trip.
A totally routine trip, but the ride to the airport was anything but. She gets stuck in what the sources call soul-crushing congestion.
Ugh, we all know that feeling.
Exactly. The kind of traffic where you just feel completely trapped, watching the minutes tick away, and you just know you're in trouble.
And that helplessness, that's so key to her mindset at that moment. She finally gets to the airport. She's running. She's desperate. She gets to the counter, just hoping, maybe there's a chance. But then the staff gives her the news that every single traveler dreads. They just look at her and say, "Sorry, check-in closed 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes. That feeling, it must have been just devastating to get that close,
Right.
to fight all that traffic only to have, 600 seconds build a wall you can't get over, all that stress, all that anxiety for nothing.
Total defeat. She has to walk out of the terminal. Her trip is ruined, and is all because of something completely out of her hands.
She must have been furious,
Yeah.
just furious at the universe.
But then, almost immediately, the entire script flips. While she's standing just outside the airport, probably trying to figure out what to do next, the news breaks.
I'm playing.
The plane. Indian Airways flight AI-171, the flight she was just so angry about missing, had crashed shortly after takeoff.
And there were no survivors.
No survivors.
Wow, that immediate whiplash-like shift in emotion from just pure rage to what? Overwhelming sudden relief.
It's a moment of just radical cognitive restructuring. The sources say her emotion went from frustration to the state of profound, heavy grace.
Grace.
Yeah. She later said, "My Ganpati Bappa saved me." She saw it as divine intervention.
And that connects to something I think a lot of us can relate to, even if the stakes aren't that high. If you're listening, just think for a second. Has there ever been a time when a huge no, a big disappointment turned out to be thank God?
Oh, absolutely. Like, you don't get a job you really wanted, and then 6 months later, the whole company goes under.
Exactly. It's that classic blessing in disguise idea. The thing that felt like a punch in the gut was actually shielding you from something much, much worse.
And that's what the mind just struggles to compute. That thin, thin line between being here and not.
So let's talk about that. Let's shift from the external event to what's happening inside her head. What is the mental mechanism that gets triggered by something like this?
The process is something psychologists call counterfactual thinking.
Counterfactual thinking.
It's literally the what if loop. Your mind just starts running all these simulations, dwelling on different realities. What if that light had stayed green? What if I hadn't forgotten my keys?
That sounds exhausting. I mean, constantly replaying those scenarios, especially when it's life and death, that has to be incredibly taxing.
It can be. It's really a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have what's called upward counterfactual thinking.
Upward.
Yeah, that's when you compare your reality to a better imagined one. If only I'd done X, things would be so much better. That path leads to regret, self-blame, and in a case like this, it could lead to terrible survivor's guilt.
Okay, so her initial frustration at the gate, that was pure upward counterfactual thinking. If only I hadn't hit that traffic, I'd be on that plane.
Exactly. But the second she hears the news, her brain does an immediate 180 pivot into downward counterfactual thinking.
So comparing to a worse outcome.
The worst possible outcome. Thank God I did X, because otherwise Y would have happened. And that comparison is so powerful, it generates instant relief, instant gratitude.
For comparison was literally between missing a flight and not being alive.
You can't get more dramatic than that. It forces this cognitive reset. It rewires your brain.
So how does that lens shift apply to the rest of us? People who aren't dodging plane crashes.
The mechanism is the same, just the stakes are smaller. When you're forced into that kind of profound downward comparison, you realize how thin the line is between everything being fine and everything falling apart.
That's the lens shift. All of a sudden, the little things, the cold coffee, the car repair bill, they stop feeling like these huge tragedies.
Exactly. They stop being annoyances and they start feeling like a privilege.
Because you're here to experience them.
Right. The definition of small stuff has been completely rewritten for you. The minor problem is dwarfed by the major alternative you just avoided.
Okay, that makes so much sense. We've got the internal psychology down. But a story like this forces you to look outward, to ask that huge, ancient question.
Fate versus randomness.
Right. Was this just a lucky traffic jam? Or is there some kind of higher rhythm at play?
And that is where psychology runs right into philosophy. For centuries, people have wrestled with this. And when you're talking about processing events that are totally out of your control, you have to talk about the Stoics.
Yeah.
Specifically, their concept of Amor Fati.
Amor Fati, love of one's fate. I've heard that, but it always sounds so difficult. Isn't that just a fancy way of saying, oh, well, it happened for a reason? It can feel a bit dismissive.
That's a great point, and it's a common misconception. Stoicism isn't about being passive or just wishing things away. It's about an active, intentional embrace.
An embrace.
Yeah. Amor Fati isn't just accepting what happens. It's about loving it, including the delays, including the setbacks.
Right.
The Stoics argue that if you can't change an external thing like traffic, you absolutely cannot let it destroy your internal peace.
So you don't focus on the delay, you focus on your reaction to it. But how do you actually love a delay? That still feels like a huge leap.
You love it because it's a necessary part of the story. The sources use this wonderful web analogy. We only see our one little thread, the delay, which looks like a frustrating knot. But the universe, if you could pull back and see the whole tapestry, sees that not as a mistake, but as protection.
I like that. So the setback isn't a bug, it's a feature.
It's a feature of the system. So that moment when Boomy was denied her ticket, that was her big Stoic opportunity. She just didn't know it yet.
And that's the big takeaway here, isn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what you call that higher rhythm. God, karma, synchronicity, sheer random luck. The principle holds.
The principle is the same. Denials are often just redirections.
You thought you wanted to go this way, but the universe or fate or chance just slammed that door and pointed you somewhere else.
Right. And that redirection, even if it hurts at first, is what you needed for whatever comes next.
So let's bring this home. How do we make meaning out of our own detours? Boomy's story didn't just end at the airport. She became, as the sources say, a symbol of hope. She saw her life as this unexpected, incredible gift.
And that's the choice we all have. We can see a setback as a tragedy, or we can see it as a setup for something different, maybe something better, something safer.
It's easy to say that when the stakes are so high, but how do we apply this? How do we bring this lesson down to our own lives?
Okay, so think about this. The next time you're stuck, maybe you're working on something you love, a passion project, and your computer crashes. You lose an hour of work.
Ugh, that feels like the end of the world in that moment.
It does. It feels personal. But instead of spiraling into that upward counterfactual, if only I had saved, try to make that shift. Ask yourself, what's the downward counterfactual here?
What am I being saved from?
Maybe the time it takes to rewrite that work makes you pause, reread something, and you catch a huge mistake you were about to publish. The delay saved you from embarrassment.
It's about reframing that moment of friction. The next time you're stuck behind that slow driver, or you miss an opportunity because the timing was off, just pause.
Take that breath. And instead of getting angry, ask the question Boomy's experience teaches us.
What if this is my 10-minute traffic jam?
Exactly. What am I being saved from? Oh, what am I being guided toward?
Boomy Chauhan's story is just such a profound reminder that grace, doesn't always show up looking like a gift.
No, not at all.
Sometimes it looks like a traffic jam. Sometimes it looks like a closed check-in gate. It looks like a frustrating 10-minute delay.
And that's such a hopeful conclusion. It's an invitation to trust the timing of your life, even when it feels completely wrong, because maybe, just maybe, the thing that feels like the worst thing in the world is actually the thing that's saving you.
Trust the process, pause, breathe, and think about the power of that detour. That's our deep dive for today. We'll see you next time.
You know that feeling, right? You're stuck in traffic, just fuming, convinced the entire universe has it out for you. But what if that delay, that moment of pure frustration, was actually saving you? I've got a story for you today that is going to make you rethink every single red light you've ever hit.
Seriously, think about that. What if the most infuriating, world-ending day of your life was secretly a moment of incredible grace? Well, that is exactly what happened to a woman named Bhumi Chauhan, and her story completely changes the definition of a bad day.
So picture this. Her day starts with that soul-crushing traffic we all know and hate. She finally gets to the airport, sprints to the counter for her flight AI 171, only to hear those words that make your stomach drop. Sorry, check-in is closed.
Just 10 minutes. Can you imagine that feeling? The pleading, the frustration, the absolute crushing defeat. She missed her flight by 10 minutes and she was turned away from the gate. Game over. And then the news breaks. The very plane she was supposed to be on, the one she missed by that tiny margin,